So this afternoon, I was minding my own business, and Electrify America posted into socials. I picked it off LinkedIn. This picture celebrating Wawa opening a station supported by Electrify America commercial. You can see the Electrify America imagery down here on the exterior of the charger. A station that is now being supplied Alpitronic hyperchargers through Electrify America commercial. And my brain went into meltdown. I had to phone a couple of friends to come into the discussion to kind of help me through sorting this out. Let's get into that discussion. Well, whenever I need to phone a friend, I always reach out to Steve and Eric, and luckily this evening both were available and able to come on. So, gentlemen, much appreciated for coming on to Out of Spec BITS, helping sort through the mess that is this picture. Boy, I can't really say how confusing this is to me in so many different levels, but I think we'll get through it here together. But again, much appreciated for coming on to Out of Spec BITS, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so to show where this picture is coming from, there is a press release from Electrify America talking about stations that Wawa will be opening. And just to go over who Wawa is, they are no small player. I looked them up on Wikipedia. $13 billion. And I worked for some medium-sized companies, and basically once you hit a billion, you become somebody. And they've done that 13 times over. And this is 2020 numbers with 37,000 employees. So this is no small organization making the decisions that we're about to go through and probably try to poke holes in, but surely they've found a path to success. And I guess we shouldn't be second guessing them from the bleacher seats. They found a path to success and they have something that they're doing that makes sense to them. But just going over this press release, and Steve, this is closer to your neck of. Do you have Wawa in Massachusetts, sir?
We do not, but I go over to Ohio pretty regularly, and I was actually down in Pennsylvania going through a few weeks ago, so all these names are pretty familiar to me.
Yes, and this is their home turf. Pennsylvania, as you say, is where they were founded, and a little bit of evolution of the company before they end up in the C-store space. And to go over where they sit in C-store ranking, this is the current listing by CSP Daily of the top C-store operators. They are in 8th place. Last year, they were in 10th, so they're working their way up the chain, very close to passing Quick Trip Corp and getting into 7th place likely next year by the amount of expansion that I'm seeing. So no small player. And again, the press release is talking about Electrify America stations. Now, this is confusing to me in so many levels. Has anyone heard of Wawa using Electrify America as of late?
So, I mean, behind me, you'll see an Electrify America branded station. This was shortly before it went live. This is actually the Quakertown, Pennsylvania location, which is third down there on the list. So here they have the BTC Power Next Gen units that we're all know and hopefully love, or maybe loathe for some people. But essentially they're wrapped here as Electrify America, and there are 4 of them just kind of added to this section, which is a existing Tesla Supercharger. So my assumption was that these are going to be just another Electrify America sliding into a Wawa, which these are owned and operated by Tesla. And actually turns out that on this list now, these ones to the right will be owned and presumably wrapped by Wawa in the near future here. So it's a little bit confusing because obviously you showed the Alpitronic hardware that looks like it's at 5 of the sites. There are 3 that look like this, which will presumably have Wawa wrapping soon. And the way they're branding it, as far as I just picked up on, was powered by Electrify America, which also opens up a new can of worm, because previously to me that was called Electrify Commercial. And there's been a lot of that with the Wawa rival Sheets in the area, which is another Pennsylvania staple. So there's a lot of different kind of overlapping threads to pick at here.
And Eric, you've been familiar with the Electrify America build out from its inception, as I understand, watching content from your channel. The Electrify America commercial was a bit of a fork from their initial push, which was basically their charter was to follow the requirement for the VW Dieselgate settlement and build a charging network nationwide. And the Electrify America commercial came in kind of after the fact. Can you kind of go over the trend line of Electrify America and how it's kind of become now a different organization from its inception, and this whole Electrify America commercial build out, and as Steve is calling it now, powered by Electrify America?
Well, in terms of the trend line, right? Yeah, they were primarily only focused on building out, as like you mentioned, as part of that VW Dieselgate judgment, right? So there was never really, in fact, they even kind of spurned any sort of requests for grant funding, outside funding, any sort of government funding. And they even built out a number of stations for other networks that ended up having like dual branding, like we saw EVgo and Electrify America. But it was always this sort of separate community service-based charging provider, if you will. Like everything was being built on behalf of someone else. And so getting into this sort of commercial space, this business affiliation, this kind of steps away from what they were doing, where they were simply requesting property leases, right, for access to put their chargers in the ground, and now actually coordinating with these businesses, as Steve had mentioned. Now you're seeing these new chargers being wrapped and branded with the location. So this is a big deviation. Previous to that, it was always just, this is an Electrify America station. It happens to be at a Walmart. It happens to be at a Target, or at, a whatever Simon Property Group's location, but it was never branded as anything other than Electrify America. So this is definitely a big deviation in that it's now, I guess, maybe most akin to something like an EVgo Extend partnership or a Tesla Supercharger for Business partnership, where the hardware and the back end is being controlled by those other charging providers, but it is being branded for that specific business. And so that is a bit of a deviation. And I think it kind of implies that what we can see from Electrify America moving forward is that they're going to maybe start expanding in a way that's different from this, we're a government regulated, paying back basically a judgment, doing this as a community service, into we are now a functioning for-profit CPO that's building branded business partnerships, and maybe seeking profitability. And then we can look for them to eventually, turn into a profit-focused or profit-driven corporation. And in many ways, it is kind of analogous to EVgo, that started out as a judgment, right? The NRG and the settlement there, but then had to make that transition over time to a private corporation CPO. We could be looking at those first sort of steps for that for Electrify America here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they were forced to be where they are, but now where they are is actually not that bad. It's like, oh, well, okay. Now we actually have a business model that works. And before we go over the actual picture and the chargers that we might be able to sort through together, I wanted to take a step back and let's see, which one do I want to share? I think it's this image. The merch I'm currently wearing was given to me by Wawa when I was at this station during the ribbon cutting. It's in Hope Mills, North Carolina. It has Tesla Supercharger, not Tesla Supercharger for Business, Tesla Supercharger stations with pull through and a whole bunch of ample stalls. Let me get a picture of the, here we go. Look at these stalls just stretching off into the distance, just a ton of stalls. It's right off Interstate 95 in central North Carolina. So they have a partnership with the Tesla team in order to, as you say, lease property in order to put in Tesla Supercharger stations. But wait, there's more. Because let me remove this, and there is a Tesla Supercharger for Business as well. So Wawa has also decided, thank you, Tesla, for leasing some of our property. But we're also going to use you to put in our own chargers. And if you look here at the image, this is branded Wawa chargers. So this is Tesla Supercharger for business. But no, that's not the end of the story either, because Ayana came knocking and the answer was yes. So basically, we see the Obama principle going on here, which is basically yes to everything, at least as it deals with electric vehicle charging. I know of 29 stations open, 274 stalls with Ayana, and under construction of the ones we know about, there's 11 stations open and 102 stalls waiting in the wings to get added on top of that. So there's just a ferocious amount of electric vehicle charging. So we've got Tesla native stations, we've got Tesla Supercharger for business stations. It's almost like they've got multiple different teams in their electric vehicle department, or I'm not exactly sure how they're structured, but it's definitely impressive the amount of management that they're bringing to bear. But rolling back to the initial point of us gathering here today, I hope this confuses you all as much as it does me, because there's so much in this picture that just doesn't make sense. So let's just go around the horn and let's stay focused with the cable. Let's, before we go to the wraps, because that's confusing in and of itself. Obviously, I'm staring at an Alpitronic hypercharger, which doesn't belong here, but let's ignore that for a second. Let's just stick with the cables. One thing I want to point out, if you look, these stalls have two different cables labeled as the same stall. So it looks as though they're doing something similar. And I don't know. Does anyone else here know if Electrify America is doing that in other locations, or if this is something unique to the Wawa build?
Yeah, they've so there's more to unpack really with Electrify America. We've seen all of this before, just in very different locations, not in the same place. So the multiport Alpitronic, we've seen at 2 pilot locations, which Electrify America launched last year in Connecticut, which I visited, and one down in Florida. So we've seen that, but it was wrapped as Electrify America. That was to get their feet wet in the NACS J3400 transition. Since then, they have used this hardware before. Again, at Sheetz, Sheetz and Wawa just kind of, interlocked at every turn when you come to Pennsylvania. And they've done this in a couple of locations at Sheetz in New Stanton, Pennsylvania is the closest I can think, not far from Pittsburgh. So there you'll see, I don't think it's actually branded Sheetz, but they do have the multi-port with 2 CCS for each stall and 2 NACS J3400 for each stall. Wawa hasn't done it yet. This is one of the first that's opened. I think there's another one somewhere, maybe Upper Derby. But again, you're starting to see it all come together, right? So these are actually all NEVI sites. It's worth calling that out as well in Pennsylvania for both Sheetz and...
Oh, that escaped me. So this is a NEVI site?
Yeah, exactly. So there's that's filtering in. There's the Sheetz ones have done the same thing. Some of them have BTC Power hardware. Some of them have the Alpitronic hardware. And then you've got the fact that they can set their own price here, right? So Sheetz and Wawa in Pennsylvania have been able to now, because they own these chargers, set their own pricing for this. So I think Wawa is skewing a bit below 50 cents per kilowatt hour, and Sheetz is skewing a little bit above it. But maybe because of the area near Philadelphia, it gets a little bit cheaper, the electricity, I think. So you're starting to see, basically, I think Wawa wants some control over pricing. They wanted to, in these locations specifically, offer the NACS J3400 handle. And then if you think about the site behind me, it already had a Tesla Supercharger. So perhaps that's overkill to be using, maybe there it makes more sense to just slot in 4 BTC Powers with only the CCS1 handle. But it does, there's a real mishmash of things here. And as you said, they're also experimenting down in Florida, Wawa, with the Supercharger for business. So I think part of this is just, we want our fingers in all the pies, start to understand what this means, what it looks like in different scenarios, and have all of those experiments running at the same time.
Great points about the NACS already being at the station behind you, and so there it wasn't necessary. And it was mentioned in the press release about CCS and NACS, and also 350 versus 400. We could assume we're talking about Alpitronic when they're talking about 400 and 350. And Eric, if you could talk about what might be going on at Electrify America, where they're pivoting away from their primary hardware partner and seem to be embracing Alpitronic with much more progress than I was expecting. I thought that it would be experimental, but they seem to be going more fully embracing the use of Alpitronic.
Well, I think part of what we're seeing is just in the layout itself, right? So we've only seen one other charging provider use that particular layout, which is Mercedes-Benz high power charging. And so this is probably the cleanest, easiest way for them to meet the requirements to provide both CCS1 and NACS to all the charging stalls. And then again, to Steve's point, being NEVI compliant, being able to provide at least 150 kilowatts of power dedicated per stall. So this definitely seems like the cleanest and easiest way for them to do that. And it's definitely a deviation from what they did originally, because a lot of the original hardware that Electrify America installed had the capability of splitting power, but they chose to put a dedicated dispenser for each stall. They've since, when they updated to their newer gen, I guess what everyone refers to as their 4th gen hardware now with the Signet and BTC Power, they've put in a single dispenser with a single plug for each stall. And, you know, on the surface, it's less confusing for the customer because there's only one plug per dispenser. Nobody's grabbing the second plug and plugging it in if they're in an adjacent stall and then not understanding why they're not getting power. So there's maybe some clarity for them in how they're setting up their hardware. But this makes it even more clear that every stall is usable and every stall is supported by all of the standards. And you know what, the pedant in me, the little nitpicker. So when you look at Mercedes-Benz, or the most recent trip I did to a Mercedes-Benz high power charging network with this format, they actually alternated which plug gets the armature and plug support. So
yeah, the 5-meter cable.
one, so this one, the way it looks like it's implemented by Electrify America at Wawa, only the CCS1 is getting that support from the armature, which actually does create some reach issues for the NACS plug. And I think that's why when I went to the Mercedes-Benz, depending on which stall you're in, one of the stalls has the CCS1 cable hooked to the armature and the other one has the NACS cable hooked to the armature. And I pulled that NACS cable out. I would have been able to nose a Model 3 in on like the far stall and still be able to plug it in on the other side of the car. It's just a ridiculous amount of reach. So that might be something that they end up adjusting to. And then it also looks like they're using maybe the oil cooled cables. It's hard to tell from the photo, but those do look like these smaller 600 amp cables, which we don't see it like the BP Pulse HYC400 implementation. So I think there's a number of reasons, but I think the split power in a way that they aren't currently configured to support it with their single plug, single dispenser setup, as well as the dedicated 150 kilowatt per stall or greater, and then the NACS and CCS support on all 4 stalls. I think this HYC400 just checks off all of the boxes for how they can do that easily and cleanly.
Yeah, and the one thing I don't know if whether or not it would also do ISO 15118 for the people who are native with the plug-in charge with Electrify America, if they could jack in here and get that to work or not. I'm assuming so. I'm assuming on their pilot sites, as Steve mentioned, that had already been worked out or not. But Steve, does this also talk about perhaps, I mean, I didn't realize there was an additional wrinkle of this being a NEVI site. Does this also mean that perhaps the NEVI program is starting to pick up steam again? Because this is one beautiful looking station. If this is what NEVI looks like, boy, I'm all into it.
Well, it's fitting that it's in Pennsylvania because these are all charging the state towards about 50 active NEVI sites, probably by the end of summer, which is about twice. I mean, Wisconsin has done a great job. All credit to Jay and checking out all those sites of the Wisconsin channel, but they are half as many as Pennsylvania's team, which just got the governor's award of excellence for their work on the Navy program. So, a lot of this stuff comes out of Pennsylvania initially. But it's interesting because at the same time, over in Eric's, part of the country there, that's where the next pilot for Electrify America has pivoted, because they're actually replacing some of these, BTC Power handles. So at their 20 stall sites, they maybe got 2 or 3 that are now NACS J3400 handles. So you start to flip again to a different way of delivering that NACS J3400 connector. But in this case, I think, as to Eric's point, it was just the easiest way. And it sounds like most of the sites that Wawa is going to put in here will be these Alpitronics. I would imagine it was just a case of, some of these locations, like the one behind me, already had superchargers. So just go with what you know. And then when you've got the small footprint and the easy access of the Alpitronic HYC400 multiport, just slide them in. And then that's a little bit smaller footprint, easier to manage. So Nevi definitely plays a role here. Wawa is starting to win a lot of these awards, and presumably that team has gone to a war, to back for a lot of that funding. So I think it's probably Electrify America just saying, look, we'll help you slide the hardware in here, but your team can do the work in terms of winning the awards, getting the funding, administering everything, and we'll just kind of slide in and provide the service.
And I also think it's noteworthy that we have a C-store that is pulling in 13 bill cool a year with tens of thousands of employees, obviously intelligent people working the offices in the back end, basically saying yes to everyone who comes to them with an electric vehicle plan of any shape or form. And obviously, I don't know about you all, but the C-store space has gotten so white hot with electric vehicle charging. I don't know if any of you all have seen in your neck of the woods as well, just a ferocious uptick in electric vehicle charging at C-stores or not, but I've definitely seen it around here.
Yeah, I don't know if you were asking the question or not, but yeah,
it was a question. I figure either of y'all could answer it. Feel free.
Yeah, and I feel like with California, obviously, it's a bit of the whole forefront issue. I think I mentioned that when I did that recent Nevi video, that California, in terms of population, in terms of passenger miles driven, in terms of EV ownership, just is top of the charts across the entire United States. So it makes sense that our build outs are sort of in that forefront. And yeah, it's across the board. A lot of the Nevi funds are going to like the Love's travel plazas. There's a lot.
Yeah, you did a great update on California Nevi, and a lot of the small C-store operators seem to be winning those awards.
Yeah, and then you see like BP Pulse is, where they own like the Arco AM/PM. They're putting in their own sets of like HYC400s. So there's a lot of movement. I think in the next 5 years, it's going to be more likely than not, if you pull into a large nationwide convenience store chain, it's going to be more likely than not that they have some sort of EV charging. So.
And Steve, in Massachusetts, is that a similar trend that you're seeing?
Yeah, we've got Nuria locally has been quite active in putting in just a couple of stalls, but they've had that program running for probably 18 to 24 months, and that's spreading out across New England. There's a bunch, really. It's hard to, not those chains don't quite make it up this far, the Sheets and the Wawas, but the travel centers, certainly Pilot has a couple of those EVgo Extend locations in. We don't have a Love's, but, there's a lot of, a C-store is a natural kind of fit. And I think you see Iona when you posted that up, it's probably hard to find a C-store chain that Iona doesn't love. So they are pretty much in with everybody at the moment. If they have a C-store forecourt, they will put chargers in it.
And for sure, Wawa. And so, gentlemen, thanks for coming on to Out of Spec BITS to kind of help sort through, because this is a hyper confusing image that I just left me speechless for a good amount of time. I mean, I'm looking at an Alpitronic with a Electrify America branding on it with a Wawa wrapping. It just don't make sense.
You're on your toes. Don't get too comfortable, because it will change tomorrow.
It's a Christmas wrapping.
Yeah. All right. Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for coming on this evening, and appreciate all the assistance in sorting through this.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Walter.